You should be ashamed of yourself. The words sliced through the hallway like shards of glass. Ella stood frozen, her fingers brushing against the edge of her locker door. The hallway, once buzzing with after-class chatter, now seemed to hum with a different energy, judgment. She turned slowly, already knowing who it was. Lindsay Blake. Cheer captain. Homecoming queen. The daughter of a local councilwoman. And currently, the leader of Ella's public humiliation. Ella didn't speak. She simply closed her locker with a soft click and turned back, as if silence could somehow shield her from the stares. But it didn't. A second voice rang out. Why don't you go tell the baby daddy to buy you a clue? Oh wait, there isn't one. The laughter that followed was like static, seeping into her ears, her ribs, her lungs. Ella gripped her bag tighter. Her feet moved before her mind caught up, carrying her down the corridor, past the sneers, past the whispers. Outside, the wind was sharp. Spring in North Carolina always had a bite, like it couldn't decide whether to soften or sting. She walked past the school gate, down the sidewalk that curved along Willow Street, eyes fixed on the cracks in the pavement. Every step reminded her of the growing life inside her, and the storm she was carrying alone. She lived with her grandmother, Miss Bernice, a retired nurse with quiet eyes and a spine of steel. Their little house sat at the edge of town, right where the forest began to creep back into human territory. It smelled like lavender and pine sol, and right now, like overcooked greens. You're late, Miss Bernice said from the kitchen, her back to Ella as she stirred a pot. You eatin' here or disappearing again? Ella slid off her coat and laid it carefully over the back of a chair. I'm not disappearing. Then sit. You need more than just wind in your belly. Ella sat. There was no lecture, no questioning. Just a plate pushed in front of her and a nod. The food tasted like memory. And warmth. But it couldn't erase the bruise of the hallway. Or the cold looks from teachers. Or the churchgoers who flinched when she walked past. She was the daughter of a mechanic. And now, the girl with no ring and a growing belly. Later that night, as moonlight painted silver streaks across the floor, Ella sat at the foot of her bed, hands resting gently on her stomach. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she whispered. The room didn't answer. But the silence didn't feel empty. She reached for the old music box on her nightstand. It had once belonged to her mother. Inside, tucked beneath a worn ballerina figure, was a folded photograph. A man, smiling. Handsome. Tall. Beside him, her mother. Beaming. Ella never met him. You left her too, she murmured. The tears came then. Not in a rush. Just slow, inevitable. The next morning, Ella dragged herself to school. Not for herself. For the diploma. For the future she wanted to believe still existed. She kept her head down. Focused on the work. Ignored the comments. Until third period chemistry. Miss Carter, would you mind telling us the formula for calcium carbonate? Mrs. Holcomb's voice was sharp, knowing. Ella stood. Her voice, steady. CaCO3. The teacher blinked. Then nodded. Someone in the back snorted. Wow, the pregnant girl can science. Laughter again. But this time, she didn't run. She stared them down. Each one. Until the laughter dried up. When the bell rang, she was the last to leave. At lunch, she sat alone under the old oak tree behind the gym. The sun had finally broken through the clouds. She opened her sandwich and took a bite, ignoring the footsteps behind her. You ever think about giving it up? It was Ryan Chase. Football star. Blonde, rich, bored. She didn't look at him. The baby? Or my dignity? He chuckled. I meant adoption. But that too. Why? You got someone lined up? Nah. Just saying. You could start over. Pretend none of this happened. She looked at him then. really looked. That's the difference between you and me, Ryan. You run. I endure. He flinched, just barely. Then walked away. She finished her sandwich in peace. That evening, her grandmother sat beside her on the porch. You ever wonder why folks so quick to judge? Ella nodded. Every day. Miss Bernice smiled, slow and wise. 'Cause they scared. You carrying a storm, baby girl. And storms remind people how little control they got. Ella leaned into her shoulder. What if I can't do this? Then you fall. And I help you up. And we try again. The sky burned orange, then purple. And for the first time in days, Ella breathed easy. But peace was always temporary. The next morning, her name was written in marker across the front gate, Ella the Easy. She froze. Students gathered. Some laughed. Some took pictures. Then a sleek black car pulled up. And everything changed. The driver stepped out. Opened the door. A man emerged. Dark suit. Sharp jaw. Power in every step. The crowd went quiet. He walked straight to Ella. I'm sorry I'm late. She blinked. You came. He smiled. Of course I did. I missed our ultrasound. Gasps echoed. Lindsay dropped her phone. The man took Ella's hand. And whispered, just loud enough. I'm James Halden. CEO of Halden Tech. And she's carrying my child. The hallway may have judged her. But now the world was watching. You think hiding out in your little apartment is going to make this go away? The voice rang out like a whip crack. Madeline flinched as her aunt's words reverberated through the cold air of the kitchen. The thin walls of the old tenement barely muffled the sounds of the outside world, sirens, traffic, and now, condemnation. The call had come early, too early. Madeline hadn't slept more than an hour, her hands cradling the soft curve of her belly as the weight of shame, and something else entirely, tightened around her ribs like a vice. She stood barefoot, shivering slightly despite the heat buzzing from the vent, her back pressed to the chipped counter. Her aunt's voice, bitter and righteous, echoed from the speakerphone on the cracked screen of her cell phone. You will marry Thomas. We already spoke to his family. You'll do it before this baby turns you into a complete disgrace. Madeline's voice was barely a whisper. He's not the father. Silence. Then a burst of scornful laughter. Don't be ridiculous. You think anyone's going to believe the father's some mysterious billionaire? Honey, people see what they want to see. And right now, they see a girl who got careless and brought shame to our family. Tears welled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. The truth didn't matter to anyone. Not when the lie was so much easier to swallow. She ended the call without another word. Outside, the morning fog rolled low over the city. She stepped onto the fire escape, the metal cold under her feet. From here, she could see the bakery across the street, the one where she once served lattes to construction workers and middle managers. No one there knew the truth. No one knew that the man in the tailored coat who walked her home under the street lamps, his hand brushing hers, was not just kind. Not just sweet. But powerful. And terrified. Her memory betrayed her, slipping into that night. The night everything changed. He hadn't meant to cry. Not at first. But as they sat on her rickety balcony, a bottle of Merlot between them and the city lights stretching like constellations, he had told her everything. The boardroom war. The deal that would bury his family's legacy if he didn't marry into the Van Gelder dynasty. And how he couldn't. Because of her. She didn't ask him to stay. She only asked him not to forget. And then he was gone. The pregnancy test weeks later didn't bring panic. It brought clarity. She didn't call him. Didn't tell anyone. She simply began. Now, months later, the beginning had hardened into defiance. Her belly showed. Her jaw clenched. And when the social worker at the women's clinic asked if she had support, she looked the woman in the eye and said, "I will." She meant it. Later that day, at the corner grocery, whispers followed her. The cashier, who once flirted, now looked past her. A neighbor mumbled something about wasted youth. She said nothing. She paid. She walked home. That night, her aunt appeared unannounced. A suitcase thumped onto the floor of Madeline's apartment. "You're staying with us until this is sorted," the older woman declared. "And we're going to the clinic tomorrow." Madeline didn't look up from her bowl of soup. She spooned another mouthful and chewed slowly, deliberately. Then she set the spoon down. "No." Her aunt blinked. "What did you say?" "I said no." Silence, thick and tense. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? What your grandfather thinks?" "What?" "I know exactly what they're saying. That I'm a mistake. That my baby is a mistake. But I'm not going to let that become true." Her aunt stared, eyes narrowing. "You're throwing away everything." Madeline stood. Her voice didn't shake. "Then it's mine to throw." The older woman grabbed the suitcase and slammed the door behind her. Alone again, Madeline placed a hand on her belly. "We're not a mistake." A week passed. The letters came. Cold, legal. Some from family. Some from attorneys. The pressure mounted. Then, the knock on the door. It wasn't the police. It wasn't her aunt. It was her grandfather's lawyer. "Miss Ellis," he said formally. "We've been asked to take custody of your medical care. You are not to make any unilateral decisions until further review." "You can't do that," she snapped. "I'm afraid we can. Unless you can prove independent income and housing stability, the court may intervene." She slammed the door in his face. That night, she opened her laptop and wrote one email. To Leon@kellingtongroup.com. Subject: "I didn't want to do this." She hesitated. Then hit send. She hit send. Rain slapped against the diner windows with a rhythmic intensity as Olivia pushed through the door, her apron soaked and her pulse hammering. Inside, whispers rippled through the late-night crowd. Phones buzzed. Heads turned. She kept her eyes forward. Ms. Gertrude looked up from the register, scowled at the whispers, then nodded at Olivia with something dangerously close to respect. In the corner booth, Helen was no longer holding court. She sat stiff, fuming over her untouched coffee as her own daughters nervously glanced between her and their phones. The rumors had hit the group chats like wildfire: "The billionaire's baby mama works at Betty's diner." And he came back for her. Olivia's name was no longer a whisper. It was a headline. Back in the kitchen, she pressed her palms to the metal counter, breathing deep. Declan had gone to speak to the board. To end the arranged marriage deal his family had been orchestrating for months. He said he wouldn't let them use Olivia or their baby as a pawn. Now she waited. The door jingled. But it wasn't Declan. A tall, severe woman entered in a designer coat, heels clicking with intent. Her face bore the poise of old money and colder hearts. "Olivia Green?" she asked. Olivia stepped out. "Yes? I'm Maureen Everhart. Declan's mother." A hush fell. She extended an envelope. "He sent this." Olivia opened it with cautious hands. Inside was a handwritten note. "They'll fight me. But I'll fight harder. Wait for me." Beneath it, a check. $1 million. Maureen's voice was clipped. "You can disappear. Live comfortably. Just leave the headlines to us." Olivia stared at her. Then she tore the check in half. "Tell your son," she said quietly, "he can keep his promises. I'm keeping my life." The older woman's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. As she turned to leave, Olivia whispered to herself, just loud enough to hear, "I don't need a buyout. I need a father for my child." In the background, Helen's coffee spilled. Again. Cliffhanger, the story of Olivia and Declan hit national news that night, leaked photos, rumors, and one blurry image of a diner girl defying a billionaire's mother. The meeting room smelled of oak and ink, its heavy velvet drapes drawn tight against the afternoon glare. The board members had gathered, 12 in total, each one a pillar of power, influence, and inherited expectations. In the silence that followed the gavel's opening knock, Eleanor's name echoed louder than any formal announcement. No one said it aloud, but they all knew why they were really there. Not to discuss quarterly earnings or acquisition deals, but to decide the fate of one young woman and the unborn twins who carried more than blood. They carried legacy. A hollow cough broke the silence. Old man Hargrove leaned forward, fingers steepled. We have to be realistic. Public image is a factor. Across from him, Miss Santiago shook her head. Public image, or cowardice? You want to erase her because she doesn't wear a diamond on her finger? She paused. Because he didn't live long enough to put one there? The room shifted, discomfort spreading like smoke. None of them had expected the billionaire's son to die suddenly, nor that his final gift to the world would be two heartbeats growing inside a woman they'd once refused to acknowledge. At the far end of the table, the CEO's chair remained vacant. His portrait hung above, expression calm, but his absence roared louder than the storm gathering outside. Downstairs, Eleanor sat quietly outside the conference room. Her hands rested on her belly, now gently round. She wore a borrowed blouse and slacks a size too big, everything about her still screamed out of place. But her eyes, those had changed. They weren't pleading anymore. A familiar nurse passed by, offering a sympathetic glance. They'll come around, she whispered. No, Eleanor replied softly, not looking up. They'll come clean. Inside the room, a voice rose, sharper, younger. Andrew, the late heir's cousin, leaned forward. We can't vote to exile someone just because we're embarrassed. She saved his life more times than you'll ever know. A few members scoffed. Others blinked. The family had always kept things quiet, but Andrew knew. He'd seen the letters. The way she'd held him after his seizures. The hours in cheap hotels when the family cut him off. You let him die alone because you didn't like her, Andrew continued. But he didn't die bitter. He died proud. Of her. Of those babies. Hargrove stood abruptly. This is a distraction. We need clean lines of succession. And if the cleanest line is through her? Miss Santiago challenged. They froze. Outside, thunder cracked. Eleanor stood, as if summoned. She didn't knock. She walked straight in. Gasps scattered like wind-blown papers. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She placed a single envelope on the table. Her trembling hands no longer trembled. In case any of you doubt who their father was, she said calmly, these were his last words to me. The room didn't move. I'm not here to prove myself, she added. I'm here to remind you who he really was. And what he believed in. Then, as quietly as she had entered, she turned and walked out. Rain beat against the windows. Inside the envelope lay a video, his final message. A message they would play 5 minutes later. A message that would shake them to their roots. But for now, they sat frozen. And Eleanor, back in the hallway, sat down again. Not to wait for permission. But to wait for justice. They're going to play it, said the nurse beside her. I know. The hallway lights flickered. And in the boardroom, the screen blinked to life. If you're seeing this, it means I didn't make it, the billionaire's son began. Outside the hospital, the clouds were gathering. A soft wind blew dry leaves across the parking lot as if nature itself was holding its breath. Inside, the lights were too bright, too sterile, a stark contrast to the swirling storm of emotion gripping everyone involved. Vivian sat alone in a waiting area, her hands clasped tightly over her belly. Her fingers were trembling, not from fear of pain, but from fear of choice. Her eyes darted toward the double doors leading to the operating room. For a moment, she wondered if she should run. Just leave. Disappear. But her legs wouldn't move. Her heart wouldn't let her. The voices of her mother and uncle still echoed in her ears. You have to think about your future, her mother had said. Think about what people will say, added her uncle. But none of them asked her what she wanted. Not once. Suddenly, the doors burst open. A nurse rushed in, calling out for an OB on emergency standby. Vivian's name was on her lips. The urgency slammed into Vivian like cold water. She stood up, only to feel a wave of dizziness. The nurse caught her before she fell. You need to lie down. We're prepping an emergency ultrasound. Your baby might be under stress. Vivian blinked away tears. Is the baby okay? We'll know soon. Come with me. Back in a dim room with humming machines, a young doctor entered, Dr. Carlyle. Unlike the sharp-edged professionals Vivian had met before, there was a softness in his approach. His eyes didn't skin her like a chart, they met hers with care. He sat beside her, glancing at the monitor. Vivian, he said calmly, I need you to take deep breaths. Your baby's heart rate is irregular, but that could be from stress. Let's take it one step at a time, okay? Vivian nodded. His kindness steadied her. Minutes passed. The screen showed flickers of life. Her baby, still so small, was trying. Fighting. Then came the knock. A nurse entered and whispered into Dr. Carlyle's ear. He turned to Vivian. There's a man outside. Claims to be the baby's father. Do you want to see him? Her heart skipped. The world tilted. She whispered, Is his name Elijah? The doctor nodded. He says he's Elijah Monroe. Vivian's breath caught. Her hands covered her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. Let him in, she said. Moments later, Elijah entered, looking like he'd just sprinted through a thunderstorm, though the sky outside was still dry. His jacket was half-buttoned, hair tousled, eyes wild with worry. He froze when he saw her. I came as soon as I found out, he said. Vivian's voice cracked. How did you even? My assistant heard your uncle talking about taking you here. I checked every hospital. Elijah approached slowly, carefully, as if afraid she'd vanish. I didn't know they were pushing this on you. I thought you wanted to disappear. I didn't want to disappear, Vivian said, her voice sharp with emotion. I wanted someone to stand with me. I'm here now. I swear, Viv. I'll fight them all if I have to. She searched his eyes for a lie. Found none. Then, suddenly, pain gripped her again, sharp, stabbing. The monitor beeped erratically. Elijah, she gasped. Dr. Carlyle sprang to action. She's contracting. Too early. We need to stabilize her. Elijah moved to her side, gripping her hand. Stay with me, she whispered. I'm not leaving you again, he said, his voice breaking. The staff moved around them like a choreographed dance, trying to buy time, to calm the storm gathering within her body. In a corner of the room, a nurse typed into a system, logging the arrival of Elijah Monroe, billionaire, CEO, and, apparently, the father of Vivian's unborn child. Outside, in the hallway, her uncle seethed, phone pressed to his ear, barking into it. You don't get it, this baby can ruin everything. But inside, another world was forming. One where the truth had found its way in. The boardroom's air had never been this thick with silence. Lauren stood alone at one end of the long mahogany table, documents trembling slightly in her hands, not from fear anymore, but from the sheer weight of truth. The walls around her were lined with family portraits of the Collins dynasty, images of steely-eyed men in suits and pearls-clad women with tight smiles. She looked nothing like them, yet the birth certificate on the screen behind her proved otherwise. My name is Lauren Parker, she said calmly. But on record, my legal birth name is Lauren Collins. A collective gasp erupted. Some leaned forward, others backward. The board members, lawyers, and executives of Collins Automotive looked between Lauren and the screen as if time itself had tripped over its own shoelaces. Isaac Collins stood at the center, jaw locked, arms crossed, his usual arrogance shaken. For years, he had played the golden grandson. But the truth had arrived like a detonation. "I was born to your son, William Collins, and my mother, Evelyn Parker," Lauren continued. "They were never married. In fact, he left before he ever knew I existed. And I never knew his name until 6 months ago." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. It carried with it a weight that no performance could match, the weight of finally being seen. One of the shareholders spoke, his voice hoarse. This changes the line of succession." Another added, "She's telling the truth. DNA records confirmed it. She's his only child. That makes her the legitimate heir." Isaac stepped forward. "That's impossible. She's just—" "I grew up without his name, without his money, without any of you," Lauren said. "But I did inherit something from him. I inherited the skills, the heart, and apparently, the same stubborn fire that built this company from scrap metal and bare hands." Isaac tried again. "She's manipulating you all. This is clearly some stunt. She's using the child." "My daughter is not a stunt," Lauren snapped, her first sharp tone in the room. "She is the reason I came forward. Because I will not let her grow up being shamed for something sacred." Behind her, the door creaked open. David. He stepped inside, holding baby Lily in his arms. The sight of the billionaire CEO cradling the infant, the daughter he had claimed in secret, caused an audible stir. "I confirm everything," David said, his voice like gravel and gravity. "She didn't ask for anything. Not my help. Not my name. But I couldn't let my child grow up thinking she wasn't wanted." The silence that followed was no longer awkward, it was reverent. The chairman of the board cleared his throat. "We'll need time to formally review succession structure and equity rights, but based on these documents and this testimony, Lauren Parker, Lauren Collins, has every legal and moral right to her inheritance." Lauren didn't smile. Not yet. She simply nodded once, then turned to her daughter in David's arms. "I told you," she whispered. "No shame. Not for you." A tear slipped down her cheek, quiet, earned. And at that moment, even Isaac Collins knew. He'd lost. But more importantly, she had won. "Cliffhanger, we'll call a full board vote," the chairman announced, "but I think it's safe to say the rightful future of Collins Automotive just walked into this room, holding her baby." The hospital room was quiet, the fluorescent lights casting a soft glow on the pale blue walls. Outside the window, dawn broke gently over the horizon, streaks of amber splitting the gray sky as if hope itself was being pulled from darkness. Inside, the silence was sacred, thick with breath held, hearts heavy. Celia lay in the hospital bed, her hair damp against her forehead, her hands curled protectively around 2 tiny bundles. The nurses had just left, and the door clicked shut behind them, leaving only the soft hum of monitors and the occasional sigh of newborns. The twins were finally here. Across from her, Sarah stood with trembling fingers clutching the end of the bed, her eyes fixed on the babies, each swaddled in soft cotton, their breaths light, their presence astonishing. For the first time in months, there was no shouting, no judgment. Just life, fragile, beautiful, undeniable. A soft knock broke the moment. Then, the door creaked open. And in stepped him. Logan. His eyes scanned the room, his breath caught. For a second, he stood motionless, as if even blinking might shatter the fragile miracle before him. Then, slowly, he took a step forward. He looked at Celia, not through her, not past her, but at her. For the first time. And the wall she had spent so long bracing herself behind, trembled. "You did it," he whispered. It wasn't praise. It wasn't shock. It was awe. And guilt. Celia didn't speak. Instead, she gently pulled the blanket back from one of the infants, revealing a soft tuft of dark hair, skin the color of morning coffee, and a brow that already furrowed like his father's. "This is James," she said softly. "And this," she added, turning to the second child, "is Hope." Logan's knees nearly buckled. The billionaire who once commanded rooms with mere glances now stood broken in humility. He looked between the two infants, then to the girl he had loved and hurt. Sarah, unable to contain her disbelief, stepped forward. "Why are you here? Did your lawyers send you?" He didn't flinch. "No. I fired them. All of them. I came to meet my children. And to ask if I could fix what I've destroyed." Celia blinked slowly. Her exhaustion ran deeper than physical. But in her gaze, there was no hatred. Only clarity. "You don't fix this," she said. "You build from it." Silence again. And then one of the babies stirred, a tiny hand reaching into the open air. Logan, instinctively, reached out, not to grab, but to offer. The hand found his finger. And something shifted. A few hours later, the sun was higher, warming the hospital lobby as Celia was wheeled out, her babies resting in her arms. By her side, Sarah pushed a second stroller carrying supplies, and Logan walked beside them, not leading, not following, but with them. Outside, reporters had begun to gather. Someone had leaked the news: the billionaire CEO had 2 children born to a girl the world once mocked. The moment the doors slid open, the flashing lights erupted. Cameras. Voices. Screams of names and questions. Celia paused. And for a moment, she almost turned back. But Logan stepped forward. Shielding her. Standing tall. "No comment," he said firmly. "This is not a scandal. This is a family." And the world, for once, listened. In the days that followed, the story spread far beyond the headlines. Not because of the twins. Not because of Logan's wealth. But because the girl everyone once mocked had chosen dignity over revenge. And the man everyone feared had chosen humility over power. The final image? Not the press conference. Not the viral photo. But a quiet Sunday morning in a modest backyard, Logan pushing a stroller, Celia reading to James and Hope under a tree, and Sarah laughing as she spilled juice on her shirt. No fairy tale. No staged forgiveness. Just life. Because sometimes, the greatest ending isn't dramatic. It's peaceful. And it's earned.